This is an exciting thing to become familiar with, is truthy and falsy in Python. In Python, truthy and falsy are terms that describe how non-Boolean values behave when used in a Boolean context, like an if statement. A value is truthy if it evaluates to true when tested in a Boolean context, and it's falsy if it evaluates to false. There are common falsy values in Python: the none, false, any numeric zero like 0 or 0.0, an empty string, an empty list, an empty dictionary, an empty set, or an empty range. All of these are falsy. They all behave like false in conditionals. Everything else is truthy, including non-zero numbers, non-empty containers, a string, double quote, even if it just has a space, it is not empty. So that is truthy. Lists, dictionaries, and sets, which you'll get into in a more advanced beginner's course, level 2. And in some cases, custom objects are also defined as truthy. So in these cases, you don't have to say if the name is equal to Alice. You say, for example, name for your variable equals Alice. And then your truthy or falsy statement would be if name colon. Just that, if name colon, and what you're saying in that line is if name is truthy. So you're not saying if the name is equal to Alice. What you're saying is if name is not null, if name is not equal to 0, if name is not an empty string. So there is text, A-L-I-C-E, in Alice, so name is truthy. So in your conditional, you're saying if this is a valid usable value for this context, then take this action, which is print the name is set to the console, else print name is empty. So else is that variable falsy, is it without any real value. So this can be helpful. It exists for conciseness. It helps you write clean, readable code without explicitly comparing against empty values. It's flexible, working uniformly across different types. You don't need to check the length to find out if the length of something is greater than 0, for example, because you could just say if my list. If this variable, you just say if my list, let's say that's the variable. And so if it's not empty, if it actually is worth using, then it's truthy. You don't have to use the operators like greater than or less than or things like that in the situations where this is helpful. And when you get into more advanced topics, you'll find it's also customizable for defining truthiness for classes and so on. But that's outside of the scope of this course. So truthy and falsy values allow the Python language to treat all kinds of objects consistently in logical conditions. It provides a way to simplify code and make it more expressive while still giving you the control to define your own logic when needed. So as you advance in your Python programming skill set, you'll start to understand that a lot more. But before we closed out the training portions of this course, I wanted you to have an introduction to something very Pythonic, which is truthy and falsy. So let's take a look at, and let's get hands-on, get into your Visual Studio Code. We'll create a file. You'll push it to GitHub. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to name this truthy_falsy.py, put my normal little file name at the top. Set up my main function definition. And in this case, I'm going ahead, as you can see, and just putting the script entry point in, and then I'm just going to type in between it. Now, of course, if you have a template saved, you don't have to create these new files every time, and you won't have to write def main or your script entry point every time. You could just make a copy of your template file, already have that, and save yourself the time. Dry principle, don't repeat yourself. So first we're starting with defining these example values. We're saying my variable is empty string and I'm assigning it the value of an empty string. There's no space between those quotes. I have my non-empty string variable and I'm assigning it text inside of the quotes. I've got my 0 variable, my any positive number, and my none value variable. Important to note there, did you see that change? None has to have a capital N. Because in Python, none is a special built-in constant that represents the absence of a value or it represents a null value. So it's a singleton object, none is, and it's defined by the Python language, and there's exactly one instance of it. Capitalizing it distinguishes it from a variable or a user-defined identifier. This is a system object. It follows Python's naming convention for constants that are fundamental to the language, like true and false. So just like true and false for your Boolean values of 0 and 1, 1 and 0, and none, these all use capital letters for that first letter of the word. That's the Python naming convention for those constants that are fundamental. None with the lowercase is just an undefined or user-defined name that's not recognized by Python. None with the capital N is always available and safely checks for no value. So it's because it's this built-in constant in Python, a predefined special object representing the absence of any value. So if you're ever typing and something doesn't work right, check those caps. Lowercase N-O-N-E, it only exists if you create it, but uppercase N with the lowercase O-N-E, that already exists without you having to create it. And you can see I'm putting that comment there, just explaining that. Now here we're going to use our truthy check. I'm just going to say if empty string. So if that first variable. That's it. Not if it is anything or if blah, blah, blah. It knows. I'm saying if empty string is truthy, then print empty strings are truthy. Else, I'm going to want you to print falsy. Empty strings are falsy. So we're going to go through and type this out for each and every one of those 5 variables that we defined and set the value to at the beginning of this script. And if you need to, just pause the video. If you're following along exactly, pause it. Type your bit out and play it because everybody's going to have their own speed, so we can't obviously make it the perfect speed for everyone. So the value of technology, the pause button. And then once we have written out all these variables and set up all of our truthy falsy conditionals, then we'll run the code and it will tell us which of these values is a truthy value versus a falsy value. So it's a great first time learning about truthy and falsy in Python. Let's go up to the right side and click the play button to run it. And there you can see it's telling you which is truthy and which is falsy. Go ahead and stage that by typing git add in the file name. Commit it. And then do your git push. Refresh in GitHub and you can look at the file, look at your commits. You can do that as often as you want if you need to feel comfortable.